Greetings to everyone with us. On behalf of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, I would like to welcome you to the first JP2 lecture in this academic year. The series organized by the St. John Paul II Institute of Culture, which is part of our Faculty of Philosophy here at the Angelicum. We meet today on a very special day, which is celebrated by the Church as the feast day of St. John Paul II. For the Institute, it has also traditionally been the date we officially inaugurate the new academic year. Today's lecture, as well as the entire JP2 lecture series, could not have taken place without the support of our university authorities, whom I would like to kindly thank. Special thanks are also owed to the founders of St. John Paul II Institute of Culture, some of whom who are here with us. A cordial welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Mirosław and Jolanta Gruszka, Mr. and Mrs. Krzysztof and Danuta Domarecki, and Mr. Wojciech Piasecki. Thank you for being with us, to all friends and supporters of the Institute, our audience and all viewers in front of the screens. The St. John Paul II Institute of Culture was established to look at the challenges facing the modern world and the Church in light of the thought and heritage of Pope St. John Paul II. The idea of thinking with John Paul II has been particularly embodied in the JP2 Lectures, series delivered by prominent interdisciplinary scholars who revisit the extraordinary contribution of John Paul II for our own day. Now, I'm pleased to give the floor to Dr. Dariusz Karłowicz, the initiator of the JP2 Lectures series and the St. John Paul II Institute of Culture Program Director. Dariusz Karłowicz will share more about our today's special guest and speaker.
Good afternoon, dear friends. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Professor Bishop Jacek Grzybowski, the auxiliary bishop of Warsaw-Praga Diocese in Poland. Bishop Grzybowski is professor at the Faculty of Christian Philosophy at the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw and author of numerous scholarly publications in the fields of the history of philosophy, political philosophy, and philosophy of culture. In his teaching activities, as well as in his own works, he addresses the philosophical inspirations and sources of contemporary cultural issues. Topic of lecture, which is titled John Paul II Concern for the Shape of Culture. In this lecture, Bishop Grzybowski will revisit John Paul II's reflection on the relationship between the human person and culture. John Paul II understood that the task of culture is to express and reflect the entirety of the human intellectual endeavor, the capacity for wonder, contemplation, and introspection of life and the world. He was fully aware that in recent decades the role of culture had undergone significant changes. For centuries, culture was understood as the foundation of wisdom, and participation in it was seen as both a personal duty and a human calling. Yet in today's world of market forces and information, where culture has become a product rather than a choice rooted in ethos, do the reflection of the Polish Pope still hold relevance? Professor Bishop Grzybowski, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. John Paul II, concern for the shape of culture. The word culture is not easy to define, not because of the intricacy of its original definition, but because of the variety of ways in which it is interpreted. Dictionaries, encyclopedias, and textbooks tell us that the history of man as a conscience-free and rational being starts with the gift of culture. It could be said that man is born with culture, which comes into existence with him, for when man transforms culture, of which he is an integral part, he creates the very thing that we commonly call culture. This is the beginning of mankind's great cultural adventure, as the very word denoting human creativity has developed like as abstract categories gradually. Johann Gottfried Herder was therefore correct. The concept of culture is so wide-ranging that there is nothing more indeterminate than the word culture. Obviously, when discussing culture, we are not confined to vague phrases and obscure formulation. The ancient Greeks were the first to observe that the definition of culture should be sought in the distinction between biological and consciousness-based sources of human behavior. These distinctions are expressed by Greek words physis and physeos, meaning origin, descent, nature, and physics, and nomos, translated as custom, habit, convention, and ultimately man-made law. The dissimilary tension that emerges between these terms, which denote respectively the established and natural order and the interference of human activity, creates the space for the birth of culture. It can thus be said that a unique feedback loop exists between man and culture. Man creates culture, yet at the same time, he is himself created by it. It is to culture that humankind transcends the constraints of its nature, affirming both its greatness and its freedom. This is also how the creators of Latin culture defined it. For if initially the word cultura referred to agrarian work performed in natural nature, which in some way opposed it, the order imposed on nature by human activity, it later came to mean the cultivation of the spirit, cultura animi. Marcus Tullius Cicero, while speaking of the culture of the spirit, of culture of the mind, explicitly articulated the concept of philosophy as the endeavor to train, refine, and cultivate thinking. In this perspective, culture appears at the aggregate of all cognitive acquisition that have led humanity from an animal, natural, state to a civilized condition, cultus humanus civilisque. There is a dialectical tension between the natural and the received, and how we, as human beings, treat the world. The most beautiful manifestation of human creativity, thus conceptualized, is recta ratio speculabilium, that is, unselfish reflection on reality propelled by a pure yearning to know, to cognize and comprehend the natural world offered to us, and then to change it for the better, not in the pursuit of profit or gain, but merely out of a genuine desire to understand it and to transform in the befitting manner. Thus, Cicero was the first ancient author to use the term cultura, culture, in a sense very close to both the classical and modern conception of the term. Over the centuries, the term culture has come to encompass a wide range of human endeavors, including religion, morality, custom, social organization, physical and mental labor, science and art. It also refers to the entirety of inventions and devices developed by human societies. In the 19th century, scholars referred to culture as the study of perfection, the inner condition of the spirit and mind that brings us closer and understanding onto what is truly beautiful, graceful, and appropriate. Above all, it distinguishes human beings from these who behave in a savage, aggressive, and barbaric way, and who don't live in accordance with the cultural and civilizational models. Let us consider then that the classified defined notion of culture pertains to the domain of shared social meanings expressed throughout various ways of making sense of the world. According to Terry Eggleton, culture is a memory of what humans have achieved throughout discoveries, disputes, interpretations, and understandings of fundamental categories of existence, such as freedom, love, happiness, true beauty, and religion. Culture is the story of the enormous historical and ideological transformations that have taken place throughout human history. Culture is thus a matter of self-overcoming as much as self-realization. If it celebrates the self, it also dissipates its aesthetic and ascetic together. If we are cultural beings, we are also part of the nature on which we go to work. Indeed, it is a part of the point of the word nature to remind us to the continuum between ourselves and our surroundings, just as the word culture serves to highlight the difference. However, it must be acknowledged that at present all these meanings have diverged significantly from what we understand by the term culture. In the contemporary world of global flows of ideas, people, and capital, the reduction of the concept of culture to humanistic, personalist meaning is insufficient. Today, culture is rather a compendium of the information and identities available from the global marketplace of ideas. Today, we openly speak of a diffused culture because it no longer stands for identity and wholeness. Rather, it is the anchor point made by the subject in choosing this is not that environment and tradition, because fixed cultural identities are crumbling and there is no longer a single norm of community functioning by which the rationale of the human way of being can be measured. Cultures primated each other, intersect with another, resulting of the formation of hybrid behaviors, lifestyles, ideas, and traditions. The notion of cultural is becoming increasingly flexible and constantly influenced by external factors, remaining in the perpetual state of global intercommunication and connection. These phenomena are attributable to both migration and changing labor markets, as well as the advent of digital technologies, especially the artificial intelligence today. The increasing tendency for cultural identity to become disconnected from its traditional sources, such as family, settlement, city, region, nation, can be attributed to the instability of work, relationships, custom, space, language, and time. This upporting gives rise to novel conception of cultural communities, customs, symbols, and law. Such tendencies are, of course, reinforced above all by the ubiquity of the media, technology, and migration. These factors effectively dissociated culture from geography, existence from place, and tradition, customs and language from their geographical context. The process of global diffusion is becoming increasingly noticeable. This is concomitant with the growing trend of individual cultural elements and entire cultural system becoming, and called from the geographical locations with which they were previously associated. Seamus Honey metaphorically described it as losing the roots. Consequently, this leads to a free floatingness of cultural identities in the human world. This phenomenon is undoubtedly the result of the ongoing process of globalization. It is evident that cultures and identities appear to be susceptible to various processes, including travel, creolization, hybridity, transculturation, and diaspora. All of this makes today culture resemble a fashion trend that a person chooses from a variety of ideas, identities, and attitudes. Individuals can choose for themselves when they happen to fancy. Culture can therefore be defined as the information and identities that are constantly available from, as Gordon Matthews calls it, the global cultural supermarket. Cultures are like the dishes on the table. One can pick up what one likes. In a world where all the ideas and historical experience accumulated over millennia covered, humanity's entire cultural heritage is manifested. The world is akin to a department store replete with the artifacts that humankind has created throughout history. If the advent of digital technology has rendered possible quick access to a boundless array of images and ideas, regardless of their geographical location or temporal period, then the need to adhere to long-established traditions becomes redundant. Having witnesses the cultural, artistic, and political developments of the second half of the 20th century, John Paul II was acutely aware of the rapidity with which mental and worldview change were occurring. He was witness to the gradual replacement of the sophisticated high culture milieu with a popular culture that was growing increasingly trivial and vulgarized. He was acutely aware of the perils connected with the dissociation of culture from values, religion, science, and ambitious art, due to his comprehensive understanding of the social power wielded by culture. Culture should realize the whole human being in their transcendence over things. It must not allow them dissolve into materialism or consumerism, or to succumb to the often negative influences of science and technology. We must never forget that when we speak and think about culture, we are speaking first and foremost about its relationships to the human person. In this context, the need to draw upon the Christian heritage, so richly drawn upon by generations before us, becomes all the more important. I'm thinking here with gratitude of the creations of Polish culture. Their spiritual legacy, and especially their lives, lived as generous gifts for others, constitute a valuable contribution to the culture of our nation. John Paul II understood perfectly that the task of culture is to show and describe the whole cognitive endeavor of man, the capacity to experience wonder and contemplation, to engage in reflection of life and the world. Of course, he was aware that the role of cultures has changed significantly in recent decades. For countries, it had been understood, as I have remained above, as the basis of wisdom and participation, it was considered to be man's personal duty and vocation. However, in the world dominated by the market economy and information, and now in the technology, it has become an economic product, a choice unrelated to ethos. It has become necessary as a transfer of symbols and content that can be employed at different levels of social interaction in everyday life, as well as in the political and economic dimensions. Culture has unfortunately become, to use Daniel Miller's wording, a process of consumption of global forms. Hence, John Paul II strong appeal for the Church's special concern to restore culture to its proper content and status. He often cited Poland as a pertinent example, a nation that has preserved its identity and its social existence specifically throughout culture. The Polish nation, as is well known, passed through the hard trial of the loss of its independence for over 100 years. And in the midst of this trial, it preserved its own identity. It remained spiritually independent because it had its own culture. Indeed, in the period of the partitions, it still greatly enriched its culture and made it deeper, since it's only by creating culture that it can keep itself in being. From its beginnings, Polish culture bears very clear Christian sins. The baptism received throughout the 1,000 years by the generation of our fellow countrymen not only initiated us into the mystery of the death and resurrection of Christ, not only made them become children of God who had grace, but also had a great echo in the history of thought and in artistic creativity, poetry, music, drama, the plastic art, painting, and sculpture. The Polish Pope conceptualized culture as a milieu for the dissemination of profound and valuable content. The power of culture is tremendous, for it assigns rules, establishes trends, reveals meaning, speaks of destiny, provides narratives that portray the world, offers understanding and interpretation, incite action. Culture is defined as the set of messages we convey about ourselves. It is a narrative of goals, values, meanings. Culture is present not only in serious choice, but also in everyday conversations, in the routine of ordinary activities, and the moral imagination of a society. Culture in an expression of man, a confirmation of humanity. Man creates culture, and through culture creates himself. He creates himself with the inward effort of the spirit, of thought, will, and heart. At the same time, he creates culture in communion with others. Culture is an expression of communication, of shared thought and collaboration by human beings. It is born of the service of the common good and becomes an essential good of human communities. Culture is above all a common good of the nation. Polish culture is a good on which the spiritual life of Poles rests. It distinguishes us a nation. It is decisive for us throughout the course of history, more decisive even than material power. Indeed, it is more decisive than political boundaries. John Paul II argued to relinquish activities that employ beauty, literature, art, and the creative artistry of man as a cultural impression to make it a medium for the popularization of ideas. Indeed, too much depends on the kind of culture that shape us. The permanent connection between culture and human nature is too important to be left to the influence of uncontrolled and unmastered ideas that are not subject to gospel message and don't draw on the humanistic and personalistic heritage of Christian Christology. An entire culture, however, the inexpectable limits of all that inhuman, had become imbued with the gospel, and where theology, the summa of St. Thomas, church and modeled matter in a way which led to adoration of the mystery, and a wonderful poet like Dante Alighieri could compose the sacred poem to which both heaven and earth have turned their hand, as he himself described the Divine Comedy, Libro Paradisio. In Italian language, se mai contiga c'è il poema sacro, el quale ha posto mano e cielo e terra. Consequently, it should not be unexpected that for the Pope, authentic culture is inherently humanistic in nature. That is to say, it is human creativity for the benefit of humanity. Culture is defined as the conscious transformation of human nature and the human living environment with the aim of promoting the welfare of human beings. This refers to the comprehensive development of an individual, including their biological, intellectual, cognitive, ethical, aesthetic, and religious aspects. Spiritual culture is an integral element of human culture, representing the refinement of the individual, particularly their spirit. Moreover, given the primacy of the spirit over the body in human nature, spiritual culture must be recognized as defining the entirety of human life. This notion was eloquently articulated by John Paul II during his address to UNESCO. Genus humanum arte et ratione vivit. These words of one of the great genius of Christianity, who was at the same time a fruitful continuator of the thought of antiquity, take us behind the circle and contemporary meaning of Western culture, whether it is Mediterranean or Atlantic. They have a meaning that applies to humanity as a whole, where the different traditions that constitute its spiritual heritage and the different periods of its culture meet. The essential meaning of culture consists, according to the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, in the fact that it is a characteristic of human life as such. Man lives a really human life thanks to culture. Human life is culture in this sense too, that through it, man is distinguished and differentiated from everything that exists elsewhere in the visible world. Man can't do without culture. Culture is a specific way of man's existing and being. Man always lives according to a culture which is specifically his, and which, it is turn, creates among men a tie which is also specifically theirs, determining the interhuman and social character of human existence. In the unity of culture as the specific way of human existence, there is rooted at the same time the plurality of cultures in the midst of which man lives. Therefore, the Polish Pope emphasized the significance of the kind of culture, symbols, content, messages, and attitudes. That children and young people are taught culture is always a source of knowledge, not only scientific and or practical knowledge, but also emotional knowledge concerning what to do and what to feel, how to react empathetically to certain situations. Culture shows these true ideas, images, myths, symbols, art, music, and architectural patterns. In the present age, we especially need to understand that the axiological interpretation of existence embedded in culture have pervasive influence of social attitudes. This phenomenon can be attributed to the fact that art has assumed the role previously assigned to religion, namely the symbolic depiction of a spiritual reality that eludes the domain of positive scientific cognition. As Thomas C. Eliot aptly observed, no culture has appeared or developed without a relationship with religion. Each of us can recall instances in which a people way of life from cradle to grave was shaped entirely by religion. The relationship between religion and culture can never be fully realized. It goes beyond what can be fully realized. It underlines our plans, choices, and attitudes. This is the realm in which we move and which surround us. This is why Christian inspiration should remain the primary source of artistic creativity. If culture constantly flows with the broad current of inspiration originating from the gospel, it reinforces the humanistic character of social life based on the noblest categories and values. This makes the world deeply and authentically human. Adopting the position that culture is not merely a market of information, identities, and symbols, but also a set of community-specific ideas about truth, goodness, beauty, love, and art, it can be understood that it needs protection and fostering. For if cultural content, attitudes, symbols, images, and narratives are to acquire meaning in people's lives and become spiritual content for them, they must be socially transmitted by reinforced by custom. It is imperative for these cultural elements to be disseminated to become integral components of upbringing, education, and life itself. The term culture is ultimately associated with goals, values, images, judgments, and descriptions of the world that manifested themselves toward various forms of communication, including speech, custom, traditions, laws, and everyday practices. The influence of these factors is twofold. Firstly, they determine the personal development of the individual. Secondly, they influence the quality of the community we create. It is culture, not technology, civilization, digitization, or even politics, society, that determine the development and success of a community. In the contemporary discourse of the condition of our personal and social lives, it is therefore recalling this observation. When culture gives way to civilization and technology, communities enter an era of decline. If culture is defined as civilization, self-awareness, then without culture we will not only be enabled to understand who we are, but also where we are going, aided by increasingly modernized and sophisticated technological devices and for what prepares. To prevent this dramatic situation, we must create and protect culture as the ancients taught us, as a culture of the sensitive human spirit, searching for the meaning of its enigmatic existence. John Paul II, has consistently proven to be an exemplary source of guidance in this regard. From the outset of his difficult and challenging life, he recognized that the most significant evangelization is carried out through culture. Man, who in the visible world it is the only ontic subject of culture, is also its only object and its term. Culture is that through which man as man becomes more man is, more has more access to being. The fundamental distinction between what man is and what he has, between being and having, has its foundation there too. In fact, the consideration I have just made show clearly that the primacy and essential task of culture in general, and also of all culture, is education. Education consists, in fact, in enabling man to become more man, to be more, and not just to have more, and consequently to everything he has, everything he possesses, to be man more fully. For this purpose, man must be able to be more, not only with others, but also for others. Thank you for your attention.
Professor Bishop Grzybowski, thank you very much for your lecture. And now we have time for questions. So please attend in this Faviarek.
Bishop Jacek, thank you very much for this brilliant lecture, combining so many elements of the Western discussion and Western tradition on culture. I would like to ask you a question on the single term which seems to be very important for John Paul II, culture of life. And just to give you a hint how my thoughts are going here and what's kind of problematic for me, you mentioned very well at the beginning that culture must cultivate in order to be true. Cultivation of physis becomes then a criterion of the true culture. If physis disappears, if nature disappears, in a sense, culture stands in the danger of being derailed. And when I think about nature, I think primarily about what the nature means, nascor, natus. So it brings us to this very fundamental human relation, which was so central, it seems, for JP2, mother and father, mother and a child, because nascor, I would love if you can reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. It is not easy. Of course, in the thinking that John Paul II, culture of life, is very important, but I think now now is the way of culture of nature. I think the nature symbols and nature rules are more activity in our society. I think the very important problem in our life and our discussion about culture is transhumanism. Because I think that transhumanism is the way of transform the nature, but not a cultural way and evangelization and gospel and tradition, but by technology. And I think that this is a very important problem and very important idea, which I think attacked the John Paul II culture of life. It is not easy to return to these Pope symbols and Pope ideas, because a lot of things and matters show us the nature is better, but culture of life and culture symbols are our individual way, not in the church, society and other groups. And I think it is the task of the church, community of the church, the way of teach the life of culture. In this situation, the nature is the first, but the culture transforms nature as our nature, and we are the human in this way. Transhumanism, I think, is the idea which attack these ideas and this way. This is a very important problem in the future, I think. And Christian communities have to find a way, the teaching of the culture of life in the second of John Paul II teaching. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentations, my Lord. But I have a worry, and I would please wish that you help me clarify, because you've spoken about culture and the fact that man cannot do without culture. Culture is a source of knowledge and a particular way to express man's existence. Now, I simply wish to ask this question. Can culture be regionalized? Can culture of a particular people become a universal culture? Or in other words, is culture universal, then a particular people appropriates certain characteristics of the culture in order to develop? For example, I give, as you mentioned in your presentation, you spoke of the Polish people. If the Polish people could survive out of the world map for more than 100 years, it was because of their culture. Was it culture as a universal concept, or was it the culture of the Polish people? So I don't know if my question, if my articulations are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for this question. The first, I think, when we see our situation, I think we see when nature is the first choice of a lot of people, and a lot of people don't remember that we not animals and only nature creators, because we have ethic. The ethic, I think, is this categories and behavior which show us another different world in the animals. The nature is the first step, but the culture show us the cosmos of ethic, choices and relationships. And it is a challenge now. Can we create the all ethic for the all people in one culture? I think now is the way, the ideas, globalization, the one culture of the all regions. But when we see the behavior of the regions, nations, cities and towns, we see uniform of the this globalization of culture. I think the Polish culture was specific, very specific, but first time of 21st century, we coming to the globalization culture, to the globalization unit model. And I don't know that now the Polish culture is unique and specific when I see the secularization and formation ideas for the young people. This is a historical problem, but now in my country, I think, it is changed. And the specific Polish culture is strong, of course, but for the children and the young people, especially the way of ideas of globalization and pop cultural ideas are closer but this tradition. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, of course, the specific culture of of my country was very important. But now it is the modern and rich country, and I think generation of children and young people think another ideas, not only traditions. Language is of course specifical, but to ideas and popularization of global models are very strong in the young people, children, and new generation. And I think that 10 years, 20 years ago, of course, it is very important, the specific culture of Poland and the specific culture of our nation. But now, I don't know. It's changing. It's changing. Thank you.
So I have one question. Probably, maybe I'm wrong, but probably about 80% of our culture is built on the language, our society space, literature and everything. And I think that now in contemporary world, we are going back to the icon culture, like in the Middle Ages cathedrals, Biblia Pauperum. So do you think it's right idea or not right idea?
Yes, of course. I think the language is very important for the culture and tradition, but a specific language like Polish, Russian, Slovenian languages are very difficult for the other people, and these languages have a specific mental view. But now the independence of the English language in global culture is very important, and you imagine in one big city in our country, in one university, was idea that all lectures will be in English. And in this faculty of philosophy, all in English. And in this idea, the specific language culture is not very important. And the second side in this globalization is the pictures, of course. And I think the popular of movies and animations and TikTok app and others, YouTube app and others, show us the not language. Of course, the English language is commentary of these pictures, but no language, specific language of the culture of nation, the culture of the traditional communities, but only pictures who are the smart, very funny, and this is the way of the building in the global culture in the picture. Yes, I think this is a very important subject, because in this context, the language, a specific language of tradition, like Polish and European language, aren't important.
Thank you. So, Professor Bishop Grzybowski, thank you once again. And thank you, our audience, for their presence and for the lively discussion. We cordially invite you to join us at the next public lectures within the JP2 Lecture series, as well as conferences to be held by the St. John Paul II Institute of Culture in the course of the academic year. The nearest will be the conference titled Rethinking Solidarity, Theology, Philosophy, and Social Thought, and homage to the 1980 August Agreements, which will take place here in Aula 11 and live stream online on our channels on Tuesday, November 25th. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you again.